I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk about the EU summit, which did see Emmanuel Macron actually vetoing the accession of two candidate countries to join the European Union, that being Albania and North Macedonia. I kind of say actually did see Macron vetoing because this ties very, very much with Brexit, and a lot of people saying that, maybe Macron will veto, any kind of Brexit deal or something along those lines. What we're seeing actually is that Macron will go against the wishes of Merkel, and he will actually veto countries that are supposed to join the union if he finds that it's not towards his interest. And Macron wasn't alone. So
No.
get into the details as to what happened with the veto of North Macedonia and Albania joining the European Union.
Yes, this is a very interesting and actually very important development, and it's not getting the attention that it should. And the reason is that everything related to the EU at the moment is being overshadowed by Brexit news. But as you rightly say, it's not just important in itself, it's also a potential straw in the wind, because it shows us the tide of opinion is now steadily turning within the EU against Merkel, but it's turning out in a surprising way. So let's just go back to these two countries. Albania is, of course, a former communist country which broke away from the Warsaw Pact in the early 60s, was led by a very strange dictatorship for many decades, led by a man called Enver Hoxha, and then together with all the other communist countries of Eastern Europe, threw off communism in the early 1990s and has taken a very, very rapid approach of alignment with the West, though a rather jagged one. I mean, there have been insurrections and protests there and all sorts of things. But the United States is extremely keen to get Albania into NATO. I should add, Albania has traditionally been an anti-Russian country, at least since it broke with the Soviet Union since the 60s. It's had a very difficult relationship with, first with Yugoslavia and now with Serbia. Understandably enough, it has a connection and an interest in the ongoing Kosovo conflict, Kosovo being a large Albanian-speaking province of Serbia, which was broken away by NATO in 1999 and now functions as a semi-independent state, but in reality as a NATO protectorate with a very large US base there. So the US is very keen to consolidate its position in Albania by integrating Albania into the Atlantic structures, into the European Union and into NATO. So that's one country. The other country, North Macedonia, is even more interesting because, of course, it is one of the constituent republics of the former Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. It broke away from Yugoslavia when Yugoslavia began to disintegrate in the 1990s. It was never itself a part of the Yugoslav wars, but it has always been increasingly unstable. It has the same name, Macedonia, as a large province or area, region of Greece. It was initially called Macedonia, the province of the Republic of Macedonia, when it was part of Yugoslavia. When it became independent, Greece objected to that name, so it could not be called the Republic of Macedonia. It then was called for a long period of time the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, or FYROM, and then very, very much against the wishes of large proportion of the Greek people, the Tsipras government, the socialist government that was empowering Greece up to last year, came to an agreement with the government of Macedonia, or former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, that it would change its name to North Macedonia, which many Greeks found in some ways even more provocative than the name Republic of Macedonia, because it seemed to imply that southern Macedonia is in fact this region of Greece which might one day be united with northern Macedonia. And I ought to say, by the way, that there are people in northern Macedonia, let's call it that, which do have irredentist claims to this Greek region of Macedonia, which they want to see united with North Macedonia. Anyway, the United States lobbied extremely hard for Greece to come to this agreement. Greece did come to this agreement. The Tsipras government faced down large popular protests to come to that agreement. It expelled Russian diplomats from Greece, claiming that they had been behind those protests. The purpose of getting those getting that name change was to allow North Macedonia also to integrate itself with the Atlanticist structures. And again, it was intended to join the European Union. I should quickly say two further things. North Macedonia also has an issue with its Albanian population, and the change of the name to North Macedonia was also deeply unpopular within North Macedonia itself. It led to protests there also, and a majority of the North Macedonian parliament appeared to oppose it, but they were basically pushed into agreeing to this name change, and many people think that some of those MPs were bribed. So here we see the United States lobbying very hard for these two countries to join the EU. Another person who's been lobbying very hard for these countries to join the EU is the so-called self-designated Queen of Europe, Angela Merkel. And of course, the British, who are, in theory at least, supposed to be leaving the EU, have also wanted these two countries joining the EU. And then what happens? Who should come along? Emmanuel Macron at the European Council meeting, and he vetoes the proposal that these two countries join the EU. And he's joined in that by the Netherlands and Denmark, which are becoming increasingly antagonistic to any form of further EU expansion. And by the way, this has resulted now in a major political crisis within North Macedonia. So we have seen a major push to get these two countries into the EU being suddenly and unexpectedly derailed. And the person who's done it is the arch integrationist, the arch Atlanticist, the friend supposedly of Donald Trump, the ally supposedly of Angela Merkel, none other than Emmanuel Macron. So it is a major development.
All right. Why is Macron doing this?
Well, for many reasons. Firstly, as I said, there is strong opposition within France to further EU expansion. There's growing opposition across the EU to further EU expansion. One reason is the more of these countries join the EU, the more people are able to benefit from free movement, and they're able to travel to countries like France, which has an ongoing immigration crisis, or so many French people anyway think. But the true reason why Macron is doing it is, of course, that he is positioning himself increasingly as Angela Merkel's adversary within the European Union. He has vetoed something that Angela Merkel was known to be very strongly in favor of. He's put the Greeks in their place because the Greek government, first under Tsipras and now Mitsotakis, as he sees it, has been drifting more closely to Germany and the United States and away from France. And of course, he's asserting himself as a major power broker within the EU. It's an ambitious and grandiose game. It's very unpopular with the leading EU powers, but it is further proof that Macron is increasingly striking out on his own and is prepared to act independently.
So are you saying that the Netherlands and Denmark are siding with Macron here? I mean,
they did the same thing because, of course, both the Netherlands and Denmark, especially the Netherlands, also have a growing immigration crisis. There's been a very strong anti-immigration movement in the Netherlands. And Denmark not only has those concerns, but is historically nervous and wary of Germany and of German power. So Denmark historically tends to align with countries like France because it has a difficult relationship with Germany. So there are rather complicated issues here, but let's be very clear about this. Netherlands and Denmark would not have vetoed this decision if it had not been for the main veto, which was made by Macron. Macron is the key player. It would not have happened without him.
All right. So in North Macedonia, we now are getting news that Zaev, the leader there, is actually thinking of stepping down and resigning.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
His power is being questioned now, and his authority is being
yes.
questioned. You know, with NATO, it seems the EU kind of comes along. It's like a package deal. And as you rightly said, the US is pulling the strings there, and he's, you know, it's pushing these countries not only into NATO, but it's almost deciding which countries are going to enter the EU, and Merkel goes along with these wishes. As you mentioned, as does the UK, it seems. Is Macron sending a signal to the United States on this as well? Does this, you know, concern Trump? Does Trump even care? Is Macron doing this, you know, in spite of Trump?
Donald Trump doesn't care. In fact, Donald Trump, as he's made absolutely clear and as he's shown in Syria and elsewhere, wants to reduce American commitments, not increase them. The deep state cares an awful lot. It is because Macron thinks he has some kind of understanding with Trump that he feels emboldened to act in this way. Now, I think what is happening with Macron, as I said, is he's beginning to become increasingly ambitious. He's reaching out to Russia in a rather complicated and patronizing way, but he seems to be reaching out to the Russians. He's also seems to be forging some kind of understanding with Boris Johnson. Take your mind back, if you know your history, to Europe before 1914. At that time, France was leading an anti-German axis which brought together Britain and Russia. Macron seems in some kind of curious way to be trying to recreate that in terms of the modern world. And in terms of American internal debates, he seems to be aligning with Donald Trump against the Democrats, the deep state, the Hillary Clintons, those sort of people. It's a complicated policy, and we'll see whether he can pull it off. And I have to say something. The Russians, Donald Trump and all the rest, as I'm sure they know, they will see in Macron a very treacherous friend, because let me repeat to our viewers, he remains a globalist and integrationist. He remains all these things, but he wants to be accepted as a leader rather than a follower. There is a high element of vanity in all of this and in this whole operation.
Does North Macedonia and Albania belong in the European Union? Do they even belong in NATO? And,
no,
and is this just a further ploy by the United States to encircle Serbia? I mean, is that the end game?
That's exactly it. I mean, and I forgot to mention, by the way, that of course France was also friends with Serbia before the First World War. So I mean, that, all these odd historic connections, in a kind of bizarre kind of way, seem to be reasserting themselves. But that's exactly why it is. I mean, they want Albania and North Macedonia into NATO and into the EU for two reasons. Firstly, because they do not want these countries, especially North Macedonia, drifting into a closer relationship with Russia. Now, they have Russia on the brain, and they want, in the end, the ultimate objective is to bring every single country in Europe, including Ukraine, including Belarus, including Turkey, into the EU and into NATO, and line them up against Russia and, of course, Russia's ally, China. There's always that objective. It's been an objective that's been there for a very long time. But the immediate objective in terms of the Balkans is to bring these two countries into NATO and into the EU in order to pressure Serbia even more. Serbia has been tilting increasingly towards Russia, and it's also been working with Russia to develop the Turk Stream pipeline, which the Russians are building to Turkey, and which will then result in spokes, in further pipelines moving across the Balkans into Central and Eastern Europe. The United States wants to block that. It wants to put pressure on Serbia. It sees Serbia as the potential danger or obstacle to those plans in the Balkans. It's tried very hard to subvert Serbia from within, hasn't wholly succeeded because of the sentiments of the Serbian people, and it wants to draw North Macedonia, which has traditionally been close to Serbia, into its own alliance system and away from Serbia and from Russia. Now, do these countries belong in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? Do they belong in the EU? I think the unequivocal answer is no. The reason they don't belong in in this system is because we are talking about a bloc which is directed at other countries, at Russia and Serbia. Creating these kind of alliances in the Balkans is, as I have said many times, a recipe for instability in the Balkans and eventually war. It is not a policy for peace in the Balkans. So it is completely wrong to extend the EU and NATO, especially NATO, into the Balkans in this way. And you are absolutely right. Where the EU goes, NATO invariably follows.
Yeah, we're at like 3 decades now where the U.S. is trying to bring, Serbia to its knees.
Yes.
I mean, this is literally a 3 decades long kind of project here.
Yes.
And Serbia continues to resist. But they are encircling Serbia now with North Macedonia and with Albania. And
Greece. And one should not forget Greece, because, of course, Greece has always been a traditional friend of Serbia. I think you were in Greece at the time of the bombing of Serbia in 1999. And you remember how people in Greece reacted to all of that. And yet we have seen that first the Tsipras government and now the Mitsotakis government are strongly supporting the government of North Macedonia in its effort to join the EU. And of course, they're aligning with the United States, Germany and Britain in trying to draw these countries into the Atlantic structures. That is an anti-Serbian policy. And it is very difficult for me as a Greek to see Greece behaving in that way. But that is what Greece is increasingly doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tsipras was a radical left communist anarchist in a way who ended up becoming a U.S. stooge. I mean, it's a very fascinating story in and of itself.
It's an extraordinary story. And I sent to you a short while ago an extraordinary article he wrote for the Financial Times of London, in which he was calling for North Macedonia to be admitted into the EU at this EU Council meeting. I mean, it's quite remarkable to see this extraordinary shift in this man. And in it, he was praising the EU, talking as a complete globalist, integrationist, Atlanticist, which is in effect what he now is, and which I suspect is what he always really was.
Yeah, he's more of a globalist than Macron and Merkel will ever be at this point in time.
It is. It's extraordinary.
It's extraordinary.
When you know
Mitsotakis
is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, Mitsotakis, the current prime minister, is their party, New Democracy, is traditionally aligned with Germany and the West. And Mitsotakis he's a child of the U.S. system. I mean, this should be no surprise what we're seeing happening in Greece.
I mean, with Mitsotakis, he is completely consistent. That has been the policy of the New Democracy Party, of which he now leads, ever since it was formed in the 1970s. There is no change there. But with Tsipras, it really is the world upside down. I mean, he's completely reversed himself on everything he once stood for. It's really extraordinary to see this, actually. But there we are. I mean, that's Tsipras for you. But what the overriding point is that Greece is no longer an ally or a friend of Serbia anymore. And that's the takeaway one should make from this.
Yeah, I mean, Greece is definitely aligned with the U.S. now.
Yes.
Full aligned with the U.S. But, going back to Albania, North Macedonia, and the European Union, you have the U.K. trying to exit out of the EU. And that's going to be a massive blow to the European Union on all fronts. And, I'll just take the financial front. I mean, it's going to be a huge blow. You have, what's the UK, Alexander? The second or the second largest economy?
It's the second biggest economy in the EU, yes. And of course, it's the country with the major financial market.
Right.
And the most powerful armed forces.
So, I mean, you have the UK trying to exit, and you have the EU now trying to supplement this with all kinds of small countries, on the periphery that really don't even meet the requirements to get into the European Union on many levels, whether it's financial, fiscal, political, human rights. I mean, Turkey doesn't meet many of those requirements. It's been trying now for, 30 some odd years to get in, and it's always falling short. Yeah. These small, periphery countries, these Balkan countries, the outside of the U.S. pushing them to get in because they've somehow shoehorned them into NATO, which even in NATO, they don't really provide any benefit whatsoever. Macron, this is probably the only time you're going to hear me say this on this channel, for whatever reasons he's doing it, Macron has a point. He's doing the right thing here, isn't he?
Yes, he is doing the right thing. Can I just say, first of all, that you're absolutely right about Britain leaving the EU being a blow for the EU. And that is one reason why it is being so furiously resisted in Britain by those who are very much aligned with the Atlanticist policies of the United States, and furiously resisted, of course, elsewhere too. I mean, there are strong groups within the EU who are also trying very hard to keep Britain in. But this attempt to bring in these other little countries into the EU is making the EU less and less workable. It's making it more and more incoherent as an organization, but it is, of course, strengthening its ideological and a geopolitical reach in a way that favors the United States rather than its actual members, except possibly Germany, which ultimately acquires more markets. So yes, Macron, for whatever reason, and we should be very clear about this, he is not somebody you can ever rely on in these kind of things. For once, he's doing the right thing. He's possibly doing the right thing with Britain. I mean, there seems to be some kind of an understanding between Johnson and Macron. We don't know the full details. And he is showing more understanding of the needs of Russia than some EU leaders are. And on the Balkans, by resisting this extremely dangerous move of bringing these two countries into the Balkans in a way which, as I said, will create eventually more disturbance and potential war in the Balkans, he's doing the right thing. He's actually acting to preserve the peace of Europe. I am sure he doesn't understand himself how right he is. He's acting, if you like, for entirely different motives. He's doing it because, as I say, he wants to be the king of the castle in Europe. He wants to show to the Europeans that I am the person that everybody must agree to. I strongly suspect, and we must be ready for this, that if he ever does establish this himself in this way, if he does ever dethrone Queen Merkel and become Emperor Macron, he might very well one day suddenly become the great champion of having North Macedonia and Albania joining the EU. But at the moment, at this particular specific point in time, he is doing the right thing.
Yeah, and just to close it out, Alexander, the concept of an ever-expanding EU just weakens the EU even more. I mean, the more members they're taking on, the more fragmented it's getting. And, this is an organization that supposedly rules by consensus of each member state.
Yes.
It's becoming completely unworkable, isn't it? I mean,
well, in a sense,
you look at all the member states now, and it's, for lack of a better word, it's a joke. It's not this core group of countries anymore. It's just become this hodgepodge mix of just everything.
Yes, but do bear in mind what the effect of that is, because if you have more and more countries, this hodgepodge of countries, as you rightly say, obviously by definition, they can't really work together as easily as they once could. So what tends to happen is that instead of the countries negotiating with each other as they used to do, the central bureaucracies, the Commission, start to make more and more of the decisions, because that's the only way that decisions can get made. And the people who run the Commission are in a position then to argue that because we can't operate on the consensus system that we once did, we can't horse trade as we once did because there's too many nation states involved, we at the center should be making the decisions that we then impose in effect on all the rest. So by increasing the number of states in the EU, you make it less coherent, but you also make it more centralized, and you weaken the role of the nation states within it. So there is also that factor always to consider and never to lose sight of. And of course, at the moment, at the top of this whole apex, there is Merkel and Germany. And the Germans, up to very recently, have told the Commission what the Commission should do, and the Commission has always done what Germany wanted. So in effect, expanding the EU increases the EU Commission, it increases Germany's position within the EU, it weakens everybody else. And that's one reason why Macron, despite the fact that he wants a stronger EU, he opposes it because that is a stronger EU against him. He wants a stronger EU with him rather than the Germans in charge.
Yeah, can't you make the counter argument, Alexander, to close it out, that eventually, though, you weaken out the periphery so much that it snaps back against you, it rebels against you? I mean, take Germany and Greece, for example. Germany, took on so much manufacturing and hollowed out a periphery country like Greece to the point where Greece made and makes nothing. Yes. And eventually you have the resentment comes back at Germany and comes back to the center, to the core.
Well, it did.
I mean, you weaken out this whole periphery that you end up with all the problems that you have, the economic problems, the migration issues, everything. Yes. The table collapses.
Absolutely, because of course it does, and of course, I mean, it doesn't just hollow out the peripheral economies, as we've seen in Greece, as we are seeing in Italy, as to some extent we're even seeing in France itself.
And Italy's a big country.
Italy's a big country,
a big manufacturing country.
Exactly. Well, what it actually does in a strange way is it's bad for Germany also, because Germany is insulated from competition, and its economy ceases to develop and modernize, because they are protected by this internal, huge captive market that they have. So Germany is losing its edge. We've discussed this in other programs, and you're beginning to see a growing crisis within Germany as well. It is a very bad system. It's a very bad system because it hasn't been thought through properly. The full implications have not been thought through. It benefits certain people and it disadvantages so many others that it makes the whole system, in the end, unstable in exactly the way you said. Sooner or later, it will all crash under its own weight. It's bound to.
We'll leave it at that. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below. Hit that like button, share the channel with everybody you know. Also, look for this video in audio format. Follow us on iTunes and on Soundcloud. You'll find a link to our channels there in the description box as well. And please donate to us on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribe. Your donation helps this channel out very, very much. So look for those links as well down below. And of course, go to the Duran shop, pick up some magic mugs, like the one that Alexander is holding right there, polo shirts like the one Alexander is wearing, and all kinds of other great merchandise.
Absolutely. Can I just say, I mean, these are phenomenal mugs, as I've discussed many times, 15 ounces, beautiful porcelain body. This one has the badge of the Russian Federation, exactly the emblem of the Russian Federation, exactly the same as you'll find on Vladimir Putin's mugs. We've done a lot about Putin recently, so it's just to remind ourselves what is on the mugs that he drinks from. At a G20 summit that he went to recently, he was drinking from a mug rather like this, with an emblem exactly like that. And it attracted quite a lot of attention. And when people like Erdogan of Turkey go to meet Putin, as he's due to do very soon, on Tuesday, in fact, you can be sure that he will also be obliged to drink from a mug like this. What Erdogan feels about that, I have no idea, but I am delighted to drink from a great mug of this nature. And you're absolutely right, Alex, we wear these phenomenal, beautiful shirts. This is a beautiful polo shirt, 100% cotton, beautifully made, beautifully stitched, marvelously cut. The absolute, platonic form, if you wish, of a smart casual. It looks great. It feels great when you wear it. It's got our own Duran double-headed eagle, which enables us to keep an eye on everything because, we're looking in both directions. And as everybody knows, the eagles have the best sights that can cover the entire world. And you can find shirts like this on our shop. You can also find T-shirts, long sleeve T-shirts, short sleeve T-shirts. You can find hoodies. You can find stickers. You can find hats. You can find tremendous, amazing things. You've recently been refreshing our shop. Our products are A1 quality. Our competitors are jealous and furious and trying to copy us and are failing dismally. So go to our shop, help the Duran, buy our great things, and Alex will tell you how.
Just look in the description box down below and you'll find a link to the shop, theduranshop.com. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Till next time, everybody, take care.